Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. So in today's video I'm going to show you how to shade this drawing, and as you can see I've already established the basic proportion. I focused mainly on the line art. So this is one of the first thing you want to do if you want to start shading. You really want to make sure your proportions and the structure are correct. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to follow exactly what you see on the reference photo. As a matter of fact, this drawing is not 100% accurate. Okay, there are some mistakes, but because of the overall feeling of the drawing, you don't spot those mistakes in the first place. So the first thing is the structure and the proportions. Make sure they are correct. What I mean by structure is that you have to understand the planes of the head. You have to understand that the planes make the drawing look more 3D. Anyway, the video is not about structure, it's about shading, so let's focus on that. So when I start shading, okay, I like to spot the light source first, and as you can see that we have two light source. We have one light source which is a primary light that is coming from the left hand side, and then there is another light source which is on the opposite side of the screen, which is on the right hand side. In order to avoid making a really flat drawing, I selected only the main light source which is on the left. But with this one I have to invent some shadows, but we're gonna talk about that later on. So when I start shading, I like to start shading the dark areas first. There are some areas that are shadows, but other areas that are pretty dark, like the hair. The hair is usually dark. The nostril, the eyes, the eyelashes and the eyebrows are naturally dark. The mouth area is also dark. So these are the areas that I like to draw first before I start adding some shadows. I don't usually start shading the hair, but as you can see here, I started with the hair and I selected an HB pencil which is not dark, but if you are confident you can start right away with a darker pencil like a 5B pencil, which I did right here. When I shade the hair, I like to follow the rhythm of the hair. I like to follow the shape of the hair. I'm not trying to copy exactly what I see on the reference photo. Once I draw the hair, it's not detailed, okay? It's just something that looks like hair. Then I go and add the eyebrows. I shade the iris and the pupil, which is the darkest of the iris, okay, the darkest in the eyes. And I just add a little bit of pressure to separate the pupil from the iris. I add the eyelashes. I go down and add some shadows on the nostrils. I don't focus on details, okay? I just make sure I draw those dark areas because I really want to create some contrast from the beginning. Once you understand the contrast, it's going to be much easier to create something that is realistic. You don't have to add too much details in order to make something that looks realistic. Anyway, so there is one shadow on the right hand side of the nose. As you can see, there's one drop shadow. So make sure you draw that and make sure it's darker than the midtones. I'm going to talk about the midtones later on. So on the side of the nose, there is some shadows on the side of the eye socket as well. And because I chose only one light source, any plane that is facing away from the light source is going to be dark. And I come down here on the mouth, as you can see, and I add the natural tone of the mouth, but the inside of the mouth is really dark, so make sure you have the separation between the two. The inside of the mouth is dark, it's really dark. So now the underside of the mouth, as you can see, is not really in the shadows because of the other lights, but I make sure I put it in the shadows. So the hands are really tricky. I'm trying as much as possible to not shade the hands that much. On the bottom side of the hand, as you can see on her forearm, there is one drop shadow right there, and in order to create a really good contrast, make sure you draw that drop shadow. Do not start with any midtones. Draw those dark values first. You can draw them slightly brighter. I like to build my shadows. I don't want to go too dark, and once I get enough contrast, I can go ahead and build more darker values. There is another drop shadow underneath the chin. There is another shadow within that shadow, which is a occlusion shadow, which is the darkest of the shadows. But anyway, you just make sure you separate those. I add the hair at the underside of her armpit. There is really dark shadows there as well, also inside the ear. Once you draw these shadows, trust me, your drawing is going to start looking good. It's enough to create contrast. Now once I add those shadows, I go back and forth and add more darker values. You can either use a much darker pencil or you can just use a pressure control. I like to use one pencil and build those values depending on my pressure control. If you are not confident, go and use a darker pencil like a 4B or a 2B pencil. Here I'm using a mechanical pencil and I start adding some midtones. So the midtones are the transition between dark and light. Sometimes they are part of the dark families and sometimes they are part of the light family. So it's up to you to decide which parts should be dark, but make sure the midtones are not darker than the shadows, and make sure that they are not brighter than the light, so there are a separation between the two. So what I like to do, especially when the light source is coming from the side, what I like to do is locate the planes that are looking up. Any plane that is looking up, like for example the forehead, the bridge of the nose, around the cheeks, all those areas that are facing up are going to be in the midtones, because they are not turning away, they are not completely turning away from the light source, and they are not facing the light as well. Anyway, so I add the midtones and I go back and forth and add the shadows. You don't necessarily have to follow this type of steps, but just make sure that you have a separation between light and dark before you actually start building those details. Okay, so now the midtones, as you can see, I'm using my mechanical pencil. I just make sure I'm not making the midtones too dark, but I feel like here at this stage they are very bright, which is not a good thing. They make my drawing look flat, so I have to go back again and build more darker values. So now I use my kneaded razor to create some highlights. I have to add midtones in order to make the highlights pop out, and the highlights are usually located on those hard edges, the cheekbone, the bridge of the nose, the tip of the nose, and the forehead. So these are where you can find those highlights. I actually wanted to stop here, but the drawing was not complete, so I used my HB pencil to add the tone of her dress, and I go back again and add more darker values for the shadows, because the darkness of the dress was making the shadows disappear. So I have to add some darker values on the shadows. Now it's time to start blending. I was really in a rush, so I decided to use my finger just to make the skin a little bit softer. So I decided to blend those midtones to make the skin a little bit softer and a little bit more realistic. So at this stage the drawing is pretty much over. I just want to go and add more detail, but the more realistic you want it to be, the more time you're going to spend on the drawing. So at this stage I was feeling like, okay, maybe I should add some darker values on the dress, because I think her dress and the skin tone are pretty much the same, which is not correct. So I had to make the dress darker than the skin tone. Anyway, so the drawing at this stage is over. Okay guys, thanks so much for watching the video. If you have made it so far, please like, share and subscribe. And also, if you want to support my content, please check me out on Patreon. I upload 1-hour videos every week, link in the description. I'm also on Discord. You can join us there. We will hang out once in a while. You can also share your art and receive some feedbacks. I'll be hosting some events like draw with me sessions there. Also, the link is in the description if you want to join us there. Thanks so much guys for watching. I really appreciate, and see you in the next video guys. Bye.